I'm joined today by Ozzy, who is the governance framework architect at GWG and a NEAR OG. Today we're discussing governance, the NEAR ecosystem, and more. Just first off, a quick disclaimer. The views discussed in this show is entirely that of the participants and does not constitute financial advice, nor does it reflect the views of Veax Labs, so NFA and DYOR. First of all, Ozzy, thank you very much for joining us. Let's get it started. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit more about GWG and NEAR DC?
Yeah, for sure. You'll have to excuse me a little bit. I have a little cold, so if I come off as muffled or slow, it's because of that. But yeah, I go by Aussie in the near space. I rolled into the near ecosystem in May of 2020, and have never left. So I've been here just over 3 years, working across multiple facets of the ecosystem. In the early days, that concentrated a lot on ecosystem and community building and some of the initiatives with the Near Degens program, the Near Guilds program, the Sandbox, so on and so forth. And more recently, that has now come back around towards the NDC and governance on Near. So, in short, the Near Digital Collective, or the NDC, is simply the Near community's initiative to take governance of the ecosystem treasury into their own hand. Ecosystem treasury is a 0.5% inflationary yield every year that currently goes to the foundation, but in the long term, the vision is for that to end up going to the community. So the NDC is essentially structuring the relevant frameworks and processes for the community to legitimately govern this treasury and ideally grow the ecosystem through that treasury.
Oh, thank you. That's short and sweet. Tell us a bit more about why governance is such an important aspect of a successful project like the NDC.
Yeah, so really what I think the NDC aspires to do is to offer governance for the near ecosystem as a whole. And that is actually a gold standard that hasn't really been achieved in crypto to date, in L1 being governed through a form of decentralized governance and not some siloed or centralized foundation on the sidelines. The reason that matters is because I think if we want to have a diverse and exponentially growing ecosystem, we do that by creating a on-chain infrastructure for different perspectives to essentially share an on-chain treasury, as opposed to some type of off-chain infrastructure moving money arbitrarily to different stakeholders on-chain. So I guess the simple answer is, with decentralization of an L1, we have the opportunity to kind of supercharge growth and supercharge the way that we're using our treasury for maximum impact and benefit as we enter this next cycle.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense, especially in the age of decentralization. A lot of projects as governance is still quite centralized, unfortunately. Why is the NDC an initiative to be anti-cartel? Is this actually an anti-corrupt project, or what exactly?
Yeah, so anytime we talk about governance in crypto, like, the first thing people are going to accuse you of or bring up in reference to a specific project is that it's very easy for the governance of that specific project to be dominated by a few select players. And that's usually what people refer to when we talk about the formation of cartels. So I think one of the cleanest cases, even though it's a little bit more nuanced, might be Uniswap, where A16Z, despite having kind of given some of their voting power away, still maintains such a monopoly on the network. It's very, very hard for any really out there, new, or even contrary ideas to A16Z's agenda to necessarily to get passed by kind of the protocol as a whole. So our vision to create a governance framework on top of Near that's anti-cartel is essentially, we want to create a framework where it's merit-based, where it's human-based, and where the will of the collective people on the protocol is the driving force of what happens, as opposed to the amount of tokens you hold or the number of friends you have. Our goal in building the NDC as an anti-cartel initiative is to basically signal to everyone we're interested in delivering governance in a way where big whales and longtime partnerships of people who know people are not going to monopolize this structure, but really it's as open as you can join the Near ecosystem, and within a year, you can be playing a role in the governance of a multi-billion-dollar L1 protocol. So it's very merit-based and very human-focused as a means of avoiding the cartel problem.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, everyone preaches community. And as I mentioned before, we're in the age of decentralization. Crypto is supposed to be decentralized, but there's still, a handful of whales or early investors and VCs like A16Z that still could wield an ungodly amount of power in certain projects. So this makes sense. What can people do to get involved with you guys?
Yeah, so this is a really, really opportune moment for newcomers and old timers in the ecosystem. Um, are essentially what the NDC has been doing for the last 8 months is building the framework and infrastructure to actually host governance on chain. And in the coming months, that first version of governance, known as the V1 governance framework, will go live with 29 electable seats open for the system of checks and balances of handling the ecosystem treasury. So everyone sitting here on the sideline in the Near ecosystem wondering, what the future in the next cycle looks like, has a very, very real opportunity of talking to their friends, talking to the people on their team, talking with their team directly, and saying, why don't we try to make a play for one of the seats in the NDC as a way of using our influence in participation in the ecosystem to benefit not only our project, but the ecosystem as a whole. I think the important thing to emphasize here is that in that governance framework, which is combined of really three institutions, which I'm sure we'll get into. One is a legislature. We call it the House of Merit to pass proposals. One is, you could say, like the checks and balances side, called the Council of Advisors, to veto proposals. And then one is the Transparency Commission, which is kind of your judicial side, just to make sure there's no unethical or cartel-like behavior happening in all three, we could say. The wild opportunity here is that that's it. So those 29 members basically have the discretion of deciding how the treasury should be spent for this year, and most likely the treasuries that will grow in the ecosystem through that inflationary yield going forward. So if you're a DeFi protocol, there's a very, very real opportunity to be able to, put a proposal in to buy a certain amount of an asset to use for liquidity providing equally across all protocols. The sky is the limit, I guess, in terms of how specific legislators are interested in using the treasury, and we're only just scratching the surface for what those possibilities mean. Another thing I'll just indicate for everyone is, if you're interested in getting involved today, we're right now pretty much smack dab in the middle of the bear market, probably another 12 to 18 months before we go up in any reasonable way. But when we do go up, that near treasury is a heck of a lot more valuable, and there's a lot more opportunity to use it in clever ways. So if people are interested in anything in the next 1 to 5 years in the Near ecosystem, the best thing they can do today is tell everyone they know and all of the groups they know about the opportunity that's emerging with the NDC, and get them to prepare to either run or support certain candidates or participate in the prioritization process once this first version goes live.
Thank you. Thank you. So if you're listening live, or if you're listening to our recap article recording, you can follow NearDC on Twitter. It's at NearDC for more information. I'm not even going to try and spell out Ozymandias for you, but I'm sure if you check our promotional post promoting this Twitter space, or read the recap article, you will get a direct link to his profile if you have any questions and you want to get involved with us. Now, with the recent launch of NEAR's blockchain operating system, or BOSS, do you think we will see this elevate the ecosystem and give it more of a competitive advantage compared to other blockchain ecosystems? And how will it engage with the NDC?
Yeah, so I think Avichal from Electric actually had a good tweet this morning that said that the sandbox for Boss looks a lot like the original sandbox from Stripe back in the day. And I think that Boss is a slow moving play. I think it's going to take some time for us to really see the benefits for it. But in short, holistically, yes, Boss has the opportunity to greatly ease access into crypto applications and into the usability of different protocols or dApps in ecosystem. And as NDC is a governance framework for the entire ecosystem as a whole, Boss greatly enhances the access of NDC if in the future you were to have institutions or corporates interested in fundamental base level governance of Near. Within the next 1 to 5 years. So I would not sleep on Boss. I think that there's going to be a world of gateways that can be built specifically for NDC, either looking at public sentiment or upcoming votes or past votes or historical votes or prioritization of how the treasury should be allocated, that will then be probably picked up and used by a number of different stakeholders that start to realize the real value and power behind ecosystem governance.
Yeah, you're right. We definitely are still early, and as you mentioned before, bear markets are for building. So BOS will definitely be a test case, but I think there's a lot of potential there personally. Now, moving on to the rest of the Near ecosystem, a bit away from Near DC itself. What sparked your interest in crypto, and specifically drew you to getting involved in the Near community and actually building in the Near community?
Yeah, I'll be short on the spark the interest in crypto. I think if anyone was around during the 2016-17 cycle and you just kind of lurked anywhere from Reddit to Discord to 4chan to Slack and all the different projects that were emerging, that was like the most batshit crazy cycle for ideation of like what distributed systems can do to change the world, right? And almost 99% of those were like completely unrealistic for the infrastructure and what was like actually able to be built. But I think a lot of people still got caught on the ideas of building a better world using smart contracts and multi-stakeholder approaches, as opposed to the kind of clunky legacy world that we live in today. Near, and the unique facet of Near, I would say, is kind of twofold. The first is the technical kind of expertise and focus on sharding and their kind of ability to be forward looking in trying to solve for the scalability problem. That's kind of just to cover your bases, sleep well at night. We know that Near is going to be relevant for the long term because of the fact that they've put such an emphasis on sharding. The second one is solving for the usability problem. And that actually is why I am quite bullish on the Boss play. Not to mention, the Near account model and some of the fancy things that they're building and around that. But like to I just keep it really simple, like Near has been obsessed with making blockchains usable. And this has been the case since 2020, and this remains the case today with Boss. And even though the public is still trying to figure out how to use the blockchain, and even though we're still trying to realize what these killer dApps are that are going to bring millions and millions of users on chain, Near's kind of focus on the problem is realizing that eventually we will need to have the infrastructure and the kind of framework for bringing billions of people on chain. And whichever blockchain most cleverly realizes that someone should be able to use a crypto dApp without having to worry about or know the jargon of crypto, it's going to be very successful in the medium term. So we're about halfway through that bet, and we're watching that bet play out, where we'll probably know in the next 5 or 6 years if Near can execute properly. They optimally will have one of the largest user bases in the world and one of the most user-friendly ecosystems, where we probably won't even talk about the ecosystem. We'll just talk about using the dApp.
Speaking of which, obviously we are in a bear market at the moment, but since Near has been around for quite a while, and it's one of the top blockchain ecosystems in the market. What's your opinion on the current DeFi ecosystem on Near, regardless of price action? Just the current state of the ecosystem. What do you think is needed to make the ecosystem a bit more competitive compared to other blockchains?
Yeah, so the DeFi ecosystem specifically is really ripe for disruption. Part of that has to do with liquidity, and I know a lot of times it's referenced as, if you can maintain some degree of liquidity in users, you can innovate easier and implement new products. That'd probably be like the first big thing that I think Near really needs to solve for. And to be honest, if you look at kind of the interest in liquid staking from Lido and the Shanghai kind of update, what came through, institutions are also getting on that field. Now, the other thing to realize about the DeFi landscape is that it's very early on, and a lot of protocols are experimenting with things like, I think it's like they're calling them like permissionless oracles, or like, completely self-contained primitives that don't have dependencies on other external infrastructure for a DeFi protocol to operate. The point, I guess, from all of this is to say, like, DeFi had some good use cases across, lending, trading, to some degree, decentralized order books, but not really like fully yet. And what we're probably going to see in the next cycle is the cleaning up and perfection of a lot of these primitives alongside a host of new primitives. And that might include real world assets. It might include more synthetic assets. It might include bridging things like treasuries on chain, so on and so forth. I think the thing to realize is, like, DeFi is a very hard egg to crack if you don't have the infrastructure in place to easily bring money into an ecosystem. So what I think DeFi needs more than anything right now, in the near ecosystem specifically, is a way for institutions and users to put money into DeFi protocols or DeFi markets without having to go through the process of Binance to Near or Binance to MetaMask to bridge to Near to then LP into a specific pool, right? So we're really like the short answer is, we need to ease user friction as much as possible to make DeFi as usable as possible, and at the same time, we need to innovate and build better products for the next cycle.
Well, that leads me perfectly into the next question, which relates to the Veax mainnet, which launched just over a month ago. Have you tried out the platform, and what's your experience so far? Obviously, one of our key focus areas was simplifying the user interface to make it easier to use for users that aren't exactly very experienced in the DEX and the DeFi landscape and have been doing most of their trading on centralized platforms.
I actually haven't used it, but I would be interested in hearing how Veax plans to grow alongside, or I guess offer better optionality than like what you would get on a Ref Finance or some of the other order books like Orderly that might be coming out.
No, well, I'll definitely share some resources with you. We've done a lot of articles, and yesterday our CPO James Davies also discussed a lot of aspects on Twitter Space with Vietnam Near, so I'll share that with you as well. So for those interested in building in the blockchain space, why would you suggest building on Near, and what tools and resources are available for those who are still on the fence about building in the space?
Yeah, kind of back to that original answer on usability, I would never underestimate the Near account model. Recent things like meta transactions make it. I think they're actually launching fast authentication on Boss as well, which makes it really easy for users to like plug in and actually start to utilize a certain DApp. There's also things like recovery keys that Elias talked about. So there are scenarios where if a user or an institution isn't necessarily comfortable carrying all of the risk on their own, there is, off-chain or legal ways to also mitigate that risk by having a third-party user recovery key. I would recommend users to also check out DevDAO, which is kind of the ecosystem wide like developer group run by Maxime, and Maxwell is also very active in that group as well. And then obviously, I think with NDC coming out, like, if you're looking at this landscape today, there's a lot of saturation and cost among a lot of these legacy chains. If you're looking to get in early and be, I guess you could say, on the frontier of blockchain crypto innovation, Near is a very good city or town for you to be spending your time in. And I mean, I think that just applies across the board to your usability toolkit is enhanced, your optionality in terms of governance is enhanced, and believe it or not, our community is growing. I know it doesn't necessarily feel that way, but over 3 years, we've kept some really, really great people in this ecosystem. And I think in this next market cycle, Near is in prime position to pop because of those things in Boss as well.
I couldn't have said it any better. I definitely agree with you that the Near community is quite strong. I don't think you always need numbers. It's quality over quantity. The community is quite strong. They're quite engaging. and I definitely look forward to seeing growth. Now, moving away from NIA specifically, and the reason we said NFA and DYOR earlier, over the last year, crypto has been a mess, although the global financial market has been as well. We've seen several crypto projects and platforms pretty much implode, such as FTX. We've seen financial institutions such as SVB suffering. But then again, we recently saw a massive meme coin boom yet again, spurned by the meteoric rise of Pepe and other meme coins. Do you think we're out of the woods, or is there a bearish case for the remainder of the year? Of course, we are less than a year away from the next Bitcoin halving, which we know from the past usually triggers a bullish market. But what's your outlook for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so clarifying, this is not financial advice, and if I knew, I would be a much I'd be a very, very rich man, we could say, if I knew exactly how this market was going to play out. But I think from a high level, like if you look at the macro, it's a very confusing landscape. I wouldn't think that we're going to be going up anytime soon, largely just because of the uncertainty in the United States with the debt ceiling, the uncertainty in Russia, Ukraine, the potential uncertainty between the United States and China. I think what we oftentimes forget is that despite some facets of crypto being desegregated from larger markets, the liquidity downstream in crypto 100% is very closely connected to these larger markets. So until the larger markets are in a position or have a reason to be interested in putting liquidity or capital and kind of energy into the product stack of crypto, let not even to mention like the very basic assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's going to be some time. So I think like honestly, if we're being like very conservative, it's probably sideways, slightly down, slightly up for the next couple months. Maybe a little more up if the Fed eases and we don't have more rate hikes. And then really what usually happens in these cycle years with halvings is we'll have like a nice like little growth phase in Q1 and the run up to the halving. We'll have like pretty mellow drop slash going sideways after the halving for like a couple months, and then it's like risk on game on, where we usually see a steady boom from like August, September all the way through until some catalyst nukes the market for whatever reason. So I would stay conservative with this and play the long game, and probably prepare to wait a good year to 15 months before we're back close to all-time highs. We'll probably grow a little bit up from them because we're so low right now, but it's not going to be, I think, the euphoria of a market top.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I think now is also the ideal time to do your own research, get familiar with the market, know what you're investing in, so that by the time the market does pick up, you either have a solid position or at least a solid understanding on the market and what's to come. Now, on to the last question. You've been working in the crypto space for a while. I think most of us, start out as traders and then eventually take the leap to work in DeFi or crypto. What advice can you give some of our listeners out there that may be thinking about taking the leap and working in the DeFi or crypto space? Where should they start, and is it worth it?
Yeah, I would say three things, and they're not, they might be hard like from the outset, but they're actually pretty easy once you get the hang of them. The first one is pretty simple. It's don't stop innovating. What that means is like the rate of growth in this space is so quick that if you're not reading the Masari reports on the nascent sectors that are emerging, if you're not playing around with the new tools that are coming out, if you're not like invested in the conversation, that's a lost competitive advantage insofar as like the tools of the future that are going to benefit users, liquidity, value, so on and so infrastructure, so on and so forth, are being created today. And the more familiar you are just with the landscape of what's possible, the better your toolkit's going to be to work, solve, and bring value to a specific solution. That would be the first one. Don't stop innovating. Second one is build good relationships, because in any kind of frontier industry, your reputation and the way that you work with people and the way that you treat people it tends to relate to if people reach out to you or want to work with you in the future, and kind of how you're looked upon as, more people come into an ecosystem, so to speak. So it's easy to confuse like the company landscape for the ecosystem landscape, where you can live insulated in a company, do your own thing, and not really have to worry about necessarily like what others might think of you if you have a strong position. In an ecosystem, it's, you really really want to be conscious of the fact that like these things matter. People are coming in and out all the time. A lot of people are staying, and a lot of your best connections, work opportunities, and network will probably come from long-term relationships. And then the third point I'll say, which is also kind of so counterintuitive for how crypto works, because it feels like everything moves so quickly, is to really play the long game. So like when we showed up in Near in May of 2020, we realized there's a very big difference in the way that you work with people and the way that you might be able to succeed if it sounds like you're only there for a couple months and then going to move on to the next thing, or if you're really interested in setting up shop because you see this as like a 5 to 10 year play. And I think like you need to definitely do diligence before you develop a conviction on a certain product or protocol. But once you develop that conviction, the follow through really determines a lot, and will probably determine where you end up on the other side of that. And I think we've seen that in crypto time and time again. So the 3 points, just to recap, that would be to not stop innovating, stay smart, stay humble, to build good relationships in the space, and to play the long game, and not expect everything to come all at once.
That's some solid advice. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Ozzy. If you joined late, we will be publishing an article, a recap article with an accompanying recording of this space. So there's something to look forward to. Give Ozzy a follow, give NearDC a follow, and take a look at what they are working on. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for joining, Ozzy, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.